So week 8 of the PhD. Not a lot to report this week. We've sort of settled into a bit of a pattern at this point, though doing the literature review, getting through all these various studies, which is, boy, there's a lot. Oh boy, is there a lot. I've taken the advice of some people that have done PhDs in the past. Thank you very much, Alice in Louisiana, and Emily. And I'm coding all of the stuff as I go. So I'm using NVivo for that, the qualitative research software. It's not really meant for this, but it does the job. It's a good way of putting in is for qualitative research for interviews and that sort of thing. But it does work in this context, helps me code concepts, and that way when I'm looking for the ideas later on, I can click on that node, as you call it, and it'll pull up everything related to that, which is going to be a lot. I am taking notes as I go, and I'm chucking things into EndNote as we go as well for referencing purposes. So, it's coming along. It's coming along. I'm still doing the upskilling, learning Python. We're into we're into neural networks now, which is, I've officially lost track of the math. I mean, actually, no, that's not quite fair. I lost track of the math pretty much immediately. Uh, I am now having more challenge keeping track of the logic, frankly. The stuff is complex, my God. Linear regression and classification weren't so bad, but with the neural networks, there's layers on layers on layers, and so keeping track of what's exactly going on and how it all fits together. But then again, that's part of the point. I've still got these resources, Coursera and so forth, so I can download all of those and I'll keep them for reference at a later stage. But it is doing its job. I mean, functionally, the whole point wasn't that I need to be able to program an AI myself. It's more along the lines of I need to know what it can do and what it needs in order to function. Been quite a few takeaways from that already. The main one being we're going to need training data. The AI will need to have a paradigm or a set of conditions that it knows are correct, and therefore it can build paradigms, build concepts around that. We've got some thoughts about how to best to approach that, but it's all hypothetical at this, or all a hypothesis at this point, so we're going to leave that for later. I'm not trying not to get too far ahead of myself, he said, while getting very far ahead of himself. The other thing, yeah, so we had their third lab meeting, the Tackling Hate lab that I'm doing this as part of. They had their third meeting for the year this year, and it's the first one I've been able to attend. So that was good. That was really good. Good to meet other people from the lab. Lots of extremely good technical expertise in there, as well as quite a few sociologists and so forth. No ethicists. I had a tyranny of knowledge moment, to say the least, where I did a little summary of introduction of my uh, of the PhD and everything, and the ethical framework in particular, and overshot quite badly, actually. I'm going to use consequentialist framework and then feed it with the deontological frames, and then we're going to produce a new deontological frame as a result. I did explain what those terms meant, but it it didn't help. So we circled that for a bit, but that's a good reminder for me that these are novel ideas for a lot of people. A new first time they've been exposed to it for a lot of people. So it's going to be pretty damn essential to spell that out in detail. I'm also aware of the fact that I haven't actually introduced my power dynamics work to anyone as yet, and that is going to be pretty damn relevant to all of this. So I anticipate it will anyway. So I'm going to have to find a time to introduce it to the lab and to my supervisory panel at the very least. Um, Might be useful. There are a few videos related to the well, there's quite a few videos related to the power dynamics stuff on this channel already, but I think it might be necessary to actually sit down and go through the ethics and then the power dynamics on separate videos. So I might save that for next week and the week after, just a summarized, accessible version of that. Um, and beyond that, what else happened? Started some new research assistant work. That's nice. Working on that right now with sovereign citizens, trying to come up with criteria based on which we can identify danger. Because sovereign citizens, being the very, very, very broad church that they are, they're also, broadly speaking, not violent or at risk of being violent. There's a few high-profile cases recently, but they're otherwise very much not. They tend to be more litigious. They tend to be more aggressive in terms of using paperwork to bog down bureaucracy, so paper attacks, as they call it. But violence is pretty rare. So, yeah, how do we come up with criteria upon which it might be predictable that a sovereign citizen or someone in that movement might be violent? So, something to consider. interesting observations already on that group is that they tend to be very reactive. They might set traps, but typically they don't go out and attack, distinct from neo-Nazis or Islamic extremists that they plan attacks. Sovereign citizens are very reactive. They tend to basically come from a position of leave me alone, you know. Of course, they do things that mean that we can't leave them alone sometimes, but financial stress seems to be the primary motivator of most sovereign citizens in getting involved in the first place, and pseudo law seems to be the primary identifier for them. But oh man, that pseudo law stuff. I mean, yeah, a good starting point if you're talking about the Magna, if someone voluntarily brings up the Magna Carta and they're not a historian, it's probably a sovereign citizen. Don't know anyone else who talks about the Magna Carta or the Australian Constitution for that matter. It's the Australian Constitution's so administrative. There's no inherent rights in it. There's nothing sexy about it really. So people bringing it up in a political context, they're either hardcore lawyers or sovereign citizens. So it's funny. Anyway, so I'm working on that. And the other thing, as I've been networking quite a lot, this is a personal speciality of mine. So I just enjoy doing it, socializing by degrees, I suppose, when you get right down to it. But networking with a few different existing groups I'm members of, as well as reaching out to different academics and expertise, I'm going to need backup on. Well, no, I'm going to need insight on this. One, I do not have the technical expertise yet. Well, let's be honest, probably not ever, to really get my head around the IT and AI side of things. So I'm going to need insights. So I've been reaching out into a few areas there. Two, human rights. So the major ethical risk with this, as always, as we've discussed several times on here already, is the risk of limiting legitimate political speech. As I've said, and I will continue to say, that is not acceptable. I will not pay a party to that. So how do you prevent it? Because I also am also very enthusiastic to squelch every Nazi in this damn country. But either way, so how do you balance that out? The suggestion I have, and something we are sort of theoretically working on at this point, we will worry about this after the confirmation once the research question is set in stone. I want to assemble a panel, a reference panel, whose job will essentially be to hit the big red button if I've gone too far. To say a participatory group, essentially their remit would be find holes in this ethical framework, find ways that it can be abused, and therefore we can plug them. And if at any point you feel like we've gotten to a point where harm is inevitable or unethical results are inevitable or the risk is too high, hit that red button and we everything comes to a cease until we fix that. And if we can't, the scope of the PhD is going to have to change. We actually had a really good meeting today with Professor Michelle Grossman, friend of a friend, and good old Leanne Sargent. Hey, Leanne. Um, Fantastic connection and yeah, had a few thoughts around that and risk management as well. It may be that we're not looking at simple bans. It might be that might be too high of a bar, though that's still within the policy realm. And again, we're going to have to figure this out. But one of the things that she suggested is that surveillance is maybe a workaround here. I have been having thoughts in that regard of, with the social media platforms in particular far as I can, so again, formative here, but we sort of got three broad categories of extremist in the sense of you got your leadership, they're doing it consciously, they know what they're doing. Your hard-boiled members, very difficult to engage with and have any sort of productive solution with, but possible. And then your inductees, early stages, young, naive, getting into it for bad reasons or misunderstanding the nature of the thing. Much easier to intervene. Diversion programs would be the obvious thing. Well, yeah, diversion style programs. So that's the sort of thing where if you can get in there with a solid counter narrative or reference to better programs and so forth. So for those inductees in particular, looking at that in the terms of what are they actually looking for? You know, like more often than not, getting involved even in particularly vile groups. Fundamentally, the motivations are positive or justifiable in the sense that you're often lonely, often lacking purpose, lacking community. In particular, extremist groups are very good at picking that and recruiting from that pool, as are religions, interestingly enough. Sorry, Jehovah's Witnesses, we're on dear. Sorry, family history. Yeah, no, not my family, but either way. Ugh. I keep skirting around these. Anyway, story for another day. Yeah, so fundamentally not bad motivations. And if you can find constructive alternatives for that rather than the extremist groups, you stand a decent chance of diverting. So that's something that an AI could potentially do. We know the programs exist. It's a matter of making that connection and making them appealing, especially with counter narratives. I'm wondering whether it's just a matter of programming, again, purely speculative at this point, whether it's just a matter of programming a AI to identify posts that are seeking to recruit and the narratives involved in that, and then just to flood those posts with mockery, as well as some alternative sources and services, um, counteracting the narrative, essentially. Yeah, disrupting the recruitment patterns, and we know that humor is one of the ways they do that. So anyway, very formative. Oh, well, as you can tell, I've been sleeping great. Yeah, I can't complain too much, but it's yeah, no, I got to get to bed earlier. Ugh, too easy when it's not a structured day, I suppose. But either way, um, yes. So on track, on track. Got to keep the literature review going. Got this sovereign citizen work to do. Got the upskilling to do. That'll keep me busy. Then there's the networking on top of that, which is good as well. But yeah, all formative at this point. So all pointed towards, for those who are unaware, the next stage will be confirmation. That is basically the point where you sit down with the uni in a formal sense for the first time and go, here's what I'm planning to do. And they go, that is either going to work or not going to work. And it's not a gate per se. It's not like they kick you out if you haven't passed. It's more along the lines of like, okay, is intervention necessary at this point? Because as you can imagine, worst case scenario would be the person goes to hand in their thesis at the end of a 3-year process and it's not good. It doesn't work. Nightmare scenario, right? So to preempt that, they have a thing called confirmation. I'm pretty confident I'll walk through that, but that's not really the point. The point is that by that point we need to refine the research question and be entirely clear on what we're doing and why and good to go, basically, because at that point we move from literature review and background research over to data collection and methodology, and that is going to be a high commitment point, right? You don't want to be gathering data that's not relevant. Not a good day. So I think and that's going to be mixed methods, qualitative and quantitative. Quantitative for sure, no question. Empirical data and testing and all that sort of thing. How do these networks work, et cetera, move, et cetera. But I think qualitative is going to be necessary too. I'm going to need to interview people. I want to interview people. Who and for what data is a different question at this point. I still really want to get in there and interview some of these extremist groups. They're never going to let me do that. And let's be honest, I'd end up getting, I wouldn't end up in a good, it would be bad. It's probably pretty obvious from these videos. I'm not great at keeping my thoughts off my face. And yeah, they're pretty bad. I'm going to do with the cops. But either way, again, a story for another day. Anyway, so that's where we're at. 3 priorities right now. First and foremost, literature review needs to continue. Secondly, the upskilling needs to continue in the background. Third, the research assistant work, which happily is basically literature review for me. And fourth, networking. So in that order. So, yep, it's coming along. We're getting there. So end of week. What did I say? Is week 7, week 8? I guess. Can't remember. I think it's week 8 actually. Yeah. So I'll be back next week.